It started like any regular Friday. Classes were done for the week, the campus was buzzing with weekend energy, and I had just finished my late-night shift at the campus gym. It was close to midnight by the time I started locking up, my feet sore from standing too long and my hoodie sticking slightly to my back from the heat of the weight room. Normally, I'd have showered and gone straight home, but that night, I lingered. Something kept me there, pacing the empty gym floor, cleaning the same bench twice. Maybe it was because I knew he was still in the locker room. Dean. The guy was impossible to ignore. He was a football player, tall, ripped in a way that looked effortless, with this cocky smirk that could flip into the warmest smile if you caught him off guard. Everyone knew who Dean was, the kind of guy who got nods on campus without even realizing it. We weren't friends. We weren't enemies either. Just familiar enough. He'd always say yo when he walked in for a lift, and I'd nod back from behind the desk. That was about the extent of our communication for almost a year, until about 3 weeks ago, when something started shifting. It began with longer glances, more casual conversation. Nothing deep, just him sticking around the front desk to talk instead of heading straight to the weight rack. Asking if I was closing that night. Asking if I worked weekends. Asking if I had a girlfriend. That one caught me off guard. I played it cool, shrugged. Nah, I'm kinda over the whole dating scene. He laughed. Yeah? Thought you'd be beating girls off with a stick working here. I gave a non-committal chuckle and turned away. I didn't tell him I wasn't into girls. I didn't tell him how I sometimes watched him more than I meant to. And I sure as hell didn't tell him that I'd thought about him, in ways I probably shouldn't. Tonight, though, something was different. The weight room had emptied, but he stayed. I had just finished mopping the hallway when I heard the locker room door squeak open behind me. Dean stepped out, shirtless, towel slung over his shoulder, hair still damp. His eyes found mine instantly. Didn't think you'd still be here, he said, his voice a little softer than usual. Just wrapping up, I replied, forcing myself to keep eye contact. He nodded and stretched his arms up, spine cracking with a pop that made his torso flex. I turned away quickly, pretending to focus on the mop handle in my hand. Locker room's empty, he added. You locking it? Yeah. You done? He hesitated. You mind if I hang in there a bit longer? It's quiet. And my place is a mess. Roommate's got some people over. I blinked. No problem. Just give me a heads up when you bounce. He smiled, and for a second, it wasn't the cocky football grin. It was something else. Something quieter. Cool. Thanks, man. I nodded and went back to the front desk, but my mind wasn't on the mop anymore. A good 20 minutes passed. I was packing up my bag when I noticed the locker room light was still on. I considered just calling out, but something pulled me toward the hallway. I pushed open the door. Dean was there, sitting on the bench in his towel, scrolling on his phone. He looked up when he heard the door. You stalking me? He joked, just making sure you weren't passed out or something. He grinned and stood, and for a second, his towel slipped lower on his hips than it probably should have. He caught it, adjusted it lazily, and didn't break eye contact. You ever get tired of pretending? I froze. What? He stepped closer. You know what I mean. I didn't move. I couldn't. My heart was hammering so loud I thought he might hear it. Dean, I don't. He stopped in front of me, just a few inches away now. The air felt thick, charged. You think I haven't noticed how you look at me? He said, voice low, almost a whisper. I'm not stupid. I felt my mouth go dry. My fingers curled at my sides. He leaned in, and his breath brushed my cheek. You can tell me to stop. I'll walk away right now if you want me to. I didn't say anything. I didn't stop him. And that was the night everything changed. I didn't move. My brain was screaming every logical thought it could come up with, that this was probably a joke, that I'd misunderstood, that Dean was messing around. But none of that matched the way he was looking at me. He wasn't smirking. He wasn't playing. He looked serious and nervous. His eyes searched mine for a second longer. Then he stepped back, just enough to give me space. Sorry, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. That was out of line. I don't know what I was thinking. No, it's fine, I said too quickly, voice cracking. I didn't expect. I trailed off because honestly, I didn't know what I expected either. Dean sat back down on the bench with a quiet exhale, towel still loosely around his waist. His confidence had shifted. Not gone, just peeled back. He looked up at me again, but this time the heat in his eyes was tempered by something more raw. "You ever just get tired of acting like you're something you're not?" he asked, almost to himself. I leaned against the wall, still processing what the hell was happening. Dean didn't look like the guy who got tired of anything. He looked like someone who had his whole life figured out. Girlfriend, teammates, frat parties. But now, he looked tired. And alone. "Yeah," I finally said. "All the time." Something flickered in his expression. A little relief, maybe. Maybe even hope. He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. "It's not like I planned any of this," he said. "It's just... lately, I've been thinking about shit more. Stuff I used to just brush off. It's like, it won't stop." He looked at me, waiting for something. I swallowed. "You don't have to explain," I said quietly. "I get it." "You do?" "Yeah. Because I've been doing the same thing. Except I didn't think you were even... you know." He chuckled, but there wasn't much humor in it. "Me neither." The silence stretched between us, heavy but not uncomfortable. I glanced at the door, half expecting someone to walk in and shatter whatever this was. But we were still alone, still safe in that bubble. Dean stood again, slowly this time. He stepped toward me, but didn't crowd me like before. He stopped close enough to feel the heat off his skin, but far enough to leave the next move up to me. "I'm not asking for anything," he said. "I just needed to know I wasn't going crazy. That maybe I wasn't the only one feeling this." "You're not," I said, barely above a whisper. His chest rose and fell once, and then, finally, he let out a shaky breath like he'd been holding it for hours. He nodded once, then smiled. Not the cocky grin everyone else got. This one was soft, a little crooked, a little unsure. "I should probably get dressed," he said after a moment, backing up. "Yeah," I said. "Probably." He grabbed his bag but didn't move to the locker yet. "You doing anything after this?" I blinked. "I was just gonna go home." He nodded again. "Mind if I walk with you?" I hesitated, but not because I didn't want him to. I was still wrapping my head around the fact that any of this was real. "No," I said. "I'd like that." And that's how Dean and I ended up walking side by side down a quiet campus path at 1 a.m., talking about everything, but also nothing. The kind of conversation that only happens when something's about to start, but neither of you knows what yet. What I did know was that for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was pretending. We walked the whole way in silence, but it wasn't awkward. It was the kind of silence that meant something. Every time I snuck a glance at Dean, I found him doing the same, and every time, we both looked away just as quickly. When we got to the corner where the paths split, he stopped. "My place is that way," he said, pointing left. "Only a few blocks?" I nodded. "Mine's right." He hesitated. Then, after a beat, "You want to come by for a bit?" I'm not trying anything. I just don't feel like being alone tonight." I should have said no. Should have played it safe. But something in his voice, the way it cracked just a little at the end, made it impossible. "Yeah," I said. "Okay." His apartment wasn't what I expected. I had assumed the usual athlete mess. Protein powder everywhere, takeout containers, maybe a worn-down couch, and a flickering TV. But it was actually clean, minimal, thoughtfully put together. A small bookshelf sat in the corner, mostly football magazines and a few novels I didn't expect. The couch was tidy, throw blanket folded perfectly across the back. "Nice place," I said, stepping inside. "Thanks," he said, tossing his keys on the counter. Try to keep it together helps keep my head on straight. I stood awkwardly near the doorway while he grabbed 2 waters from the fridge and tossed me one. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, angled toward each other but not touching. The space between us felt deliberate, like neither of us was ready to close it, but neither of us was moving away either. He took a sip from his bottle, then set it down. He He scratched at the back of his neck. Can I ask you something? Sure. Did you always know? I didn't have to ask what he meant. Yeah, I said, since high school. He nodded like he'd expected that. I didn't, he admitted. Not really. I mean, I always kind of knew I looked at guys sometimes. But I told myself it didn't mean anything. It wasn't until, I don't know, a couple months ago. What changed? He shrugged, but didn't answer right away. Maybe I just got tired of trying so hard, he said, of pretending I didn't feel what I felt. Then he looked right at me. Especially around you. That hit harder than I expected. I felt the air shift. Dean. He held up a hand. I'm not saying this to mess with you. I'm not looking to experiment or figure shit out and leave someone else picking up the pieces. I wouldn't do that to you. I stared at him, trying to find any sign of doubt, of hesitation. There was none. I don't know what this is, he said. I just know I feel something, and I think you do too. The space between us crackled like a live wire. Every part of me screamed to close it, to lean in, to see what would happen if I did. So I did. Slowly, cautiously, I shifted across the couch. My leg brushed his. He didn't move away. When our knees touched, he let out a quiet breath, like he'd been holding it in for hours. And then, finally, I reached out and touched his hand. His fingers closed around mine instantly. No words. Just the weight of that contact. Warm. Grounding. Real. He looked down at our hands, then up at me. You sure? He asked, voice low. I've been sure for a while, I said. And then he leaned in. Our first kiss wasn't some perfect cinematic moment. It was nervous and hesitant, a little awkward at first. But when his lips pressed to mine, everything else faded. The doubt, the overthinking, the months of wondering. It was like something locked into place. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. I've wanted to do that for weeks, he whispered. Same, I said, smiling. He squeezed my hand. You want to stay? I didn't answer. I just nodded. Dean got up first, pulling me by the hand toward his room, like he was scared if he let go, I'd disappear. I followed without a word, still half in disbelief that this was really happening. His bedroom was dim, lit only by the streetlights filtering through half-closed blinds, clean, like the rest of his place. The bed was unmade, a tangle of sheets and pillows, like he'd been tossing all night. He turned to face me once we were inside, his expression unsure again. If this is too fast, just say so. We can. I kissed him before he could finish. This time, it wasn't hesitant. It was slow, deep, and full of everything we hadn't said. Weeks of glances, tension, wondering. His hands came up to my waist, sliding under my shirt, and when I didn't stop him, he pulled it off and dropped it to the floor. You're warm, he muttered, lips brushing my neck. So are you, I breathed, tugging at the hem of his shirt until it was gone too. He looked different in the low light, softer somehow. I'd seen him shirtless in the gym, sure, but this wasn't the same. He wasn't flexing or showing off. He was just standing there, vulnerable and wanting. His fingers traced along my chest like he was memorizing it. I've never done this before, he admitted quietly. I looked at him. With a guy, he nodded. Not like this, not with someone I actually like. I reached for his hand again and squeezed it. You don't have to be anything but honest. Dean kissed me again, and this time it turned messy fast. His hands in my hair, mine digging into his back. We stumbled toward the bed, fell onto it tangled together, laughing between kisses. The nervousness melted away with every touch, every shift of our bodies against each other. He took his time. He wasn't rough or in a rush. He kissed my neck, my shoulders, like he was still trying to convince himself this was real. Every time I moaned softly or arched toward him, I felt him tense up, surprised but clearly turned on by it. You're so into this, he said breathlessly, almost like he hadn't expected it. Yeah, I whispered, lips brushing his ear. Are you? His answer was pressing his hips against mine. No room for doubt after that. It wasn't perfect. There were pauses, a few laughs when we bumped heads, fumbled with a button, but none of it mattered. What mattered was how present he was, how he kept checking in with his eyes, his hands, like he needed to be sure I was still with him in every moment. And I was. I hadn't felt that kind of closeness with anyone in a long time. Afterward, we lay tangled in his sheets, our skin sticky with sweat, his head resting on my chest. Neither of us spoke for a while, just listened to the soft hum of his fan spinning above us. Finally, he broke the silence. I feel like I've been holding my breath for months. I ran my fingers through his hair. So breathe. He shifted a little closer, wrapping an arm tighter around my waist. I didn't think you'd want me like this, he said softly. I wanted you the whole time, I said. I just didn't think you'd ever see me that way. He didn't answer, just pressed a kiss to my chest and held on like he never wanted to let go. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to hide any part of myself, not even from him. I woke up before him. For a few seconds, I forgot where I was. The unfamiliar ceiling, the soft snoring next to me, the weight of an arm still draped over my waist. Then it all came back. Dean. Last night. Everything. He was still asleep, face relaxed in a way I'd never seen. His usual jaw-clenched, ready for anything expression was gone. He looked peaceful, young, real. I didn't move. Not because I was afraid to wake him. I just didn't want the moment to end. Eventually, he stirred. His fingers flexed slightly against my skin, and then he mumbled something I didn't catch before blinking his eyes open. For a second, he looked confused. Then his gaze found mine, and something clicked into place. He smiled. Hey, he said, voice raspy from sleep. Hey, I whispered back. Neither of us said anything for a bit. He just kept his hand where it was, thumb gently moving across my side like he wasn't quite ready to let go. I half thought you'd be gone, he admitted. I thought about it, I teased, but your bed's comfortable. That earned me a grin. Yeah? I nodded. And maybe I didn't want to leave. Dean propped himself up on one elbow, his hair a mess, eyes squinting against the morning light. I don't know what happens now, he said, honesty laced in every word. Neither do I replied. He leaned down, kissed my shoulder. But I'm not pretending anymore. About you. About what I want. That hit me harder than anything the night before. We got up eventually, both of us a little awkward, like we weren't sure how to act now that the high of the moment had passed. But it wasn't bad. If anything, it felt normal. Like the new version of us was still finding its footing. Dean made coffee while I sat at the counter in one of his hoodies. He handed me a mug and didn't try to hide the way he looked at me. Like he was still surprised I was there. Like he liked it. You ever tell anyone? He asked after a few sips. About you, I mean, I shrugged. Some friends. Not really close with my family anymore. You? He shook his head. No one. I think people assume stuff, but I've always just played it safe. I didn't push. He was already opening up more than I expected. I don't need a label, he said quietly. Not yet, but I know what I felt with you, and I don't want that to be a one-time thing. I set my mug down and looked at him. It doesn't have to be. He reached across the counter and took my hand again, just like he had last night on the couch. Good, he said, because I'm not done figuring this out. But I want to figure it out with you. We didn't talk about what we were. Not officially. There were no labels, no what are we doing conversations, but something had shifted. You could feel it in the way he looked at me across the gym, the way he lingered after his workouts, the way he walked me home more nights than not. At first, we kept our distance in public, but even that started to fade. The first time he touched me in front of someone else, just a casual hand on the small of my back while we walked out of the campus rec center, I caught the wide-eyed glance from one of the other guys at the desk. Dean didn't even flinch. It was small, but it felt huge. Later, I asked him about it. You didn't care if he saw? He shrugged. Do you? No, I said, but I didn't think you'd be ready for that. Dean sat back on my bed, arms crossed over his chest, eyes on me. "I'm not trying to make a statement," he said. "But if people are gonna notice, they're gonna notice. I'd rather them see us than see nothing and make something up." I nodded, but I couldn't hide my smile. "I like being seen with you," he added after a pause. That was the thing about Dean. He was always quieter after something big, like the words had cost him a lot to say. But when he said them, he meant them. Word started getting around. Slowly, I saw it in the double takes in the dining hall. Heard it in the tone when one of his teammates said, "Yo, you and that gym guy tight now?" He didn't deny it. Just gave a calm, "Yeah, we hang out." That was all it took. No drama. No fireworks. Just quiet confirmation that the rumors were true and that he didn't care. But not everyone was cool about it. One afternoon, I walked into the locker room to find Dean already in there, wrapping up his workout. I was just grabbing my jacket when one of the other football guys walked in and muttered something under his breath, just loud enough for us both to hear. Dean straightened up immediately. "You got something to say, Carter?" The guy smirked. "Nah, just didn't realize the gym came with boyfriends now." Dean stepped forward, eyes sharp. "Yeah? And?" I froze, half expecting a fight, but Carter just shrugged and backed off, muttering something about, "Whatever, man." Before walking out, Dean turned to me after a moment. "You okay?" I nodded, still a little stunned. "You didn't have to." "I did," he cut in, "because if someone's gonna come for us, they'll have to go through me first." My heart did this weird stutter jump thing in my chest. He sat down on the bench, breathing a little heavier than before. "I'm not gonna let people talk shit," he said. "Not about you, not about us." I sat next to him, our knees brushing. "You know this might not get easier, right?" He looked at me and smiled. "I didn't sign up for easy. I signed up for real." By the time winter break rolled around, we were spending most nights together, not always in bed, not always tangled up in each other. Sometimes it was just sitting on the couch watching dumb YouTube videos, sharing takeout, trading glances that said more than either of us could. We never used words like boyfriend. Dean wasn't there yet, and honestly, neither was I. But the way he held my hand under the table when we went out to eat, the way he always waited for me outside my last class on Thursdays, the way he'd lean in and kiss me on the neck when no one was around, all of that said more than any label could. And it wasn't just the physical stuff. He started opening up in ways I didn't expect, like the night he told me about his dad. We were lying in bed, the lights off, the room quiet except for the hum of the heater. I was drifting, head tucked under his arm, when he spoke. "My dad used to say, being soft made you weak," he said out of nowhere. I blinked up at him. "What?" Dean stared at the ceiling. He meant emotions, crying, talking about stuff, liking things that weren't expected. I didn't say anything. Just waited. He kept going. "I think that's why I didn't figure this out sooner. I spent so long trying not to feel anything I wasn't supposed to." "Dean," I said quietly, reaching up to touch his chest, "you're not weak." He exhaled, like he'd been holding that breath in for years. "I know. I just needed to say it out loud, I guess." I kissed him. Soft, slow, nothing rushed. And when I pulled back, he looked at me with something raw and unguarded. "I'm glad it was you," he said. And that was the moment I realized this was no longer something casual. It never had been. We didn't make a big deal about the holidays. I went home to visit my mom. He stayed on campus, picked up a few shifts at the rec center. We texted constantly, FaceTimed every night. But when I came back in January, he was at the bus station waiting for me. No jacket, just a hoodie and joggers, holding 2 coffees and grinning like an idiot. "Welcome back," he said, handing me one. "You waited out here? Couldn't wait to see you." It hit me like a punch to the chest, warm and painful at the same time. Later, when we got back to his place, I dropped my bag, stepped into his space, and looked at him for a long second. "Dean," I said, "I love you." He froze, not in fear, but in disbelief. Like he'd been waiting for someone to say it his whole life and didn't realize how much he needed it until he heard it. Then he stepped forward, wrapped both arms around me, and whispered into my neck, "I love you too." No hesitation, no overthinking, just that. We stood there in the silence, holding each other like the world outside didn't matter. And maybe, for the first time in our lives, it really didn't. We hadn't planned any of this, but somehow it had turned into the most real thing either of us had ever known.